Erion Kodra, his sister Mira, the fallen Luan Berisha, the curious Patrick Doyle, and the ambitious Arban Salmani. 5 lives intertwined in Liverpool's shadows, where loyalty is tested, power is earned, and betrayal can strike at any moment. Please subscribe for daily new update of gang crime story and watch till end. Erion Kodra arrived in Liverpool at the age of 19, carrying nothing but a small bag of belongings and the weight of his family's reputation. Back in Albania, his father had been part of a minor criminal network, handling shipments and enforcing local deals. Erion had grown up hearing stories of loyalty, betrayal, and the quiet power that came from understanding how systems worked. But he was not content to simply follow in his father's footsteps. He wanted something larger, something that would mark his name in a city far from home. Liverpool, with its sprawling docks, crowded streets, and hidden networks, seemed perfect. It offered opportunity for those patient enough to observe and cunning enough to act without drawing attention. His first weeks were spent quietly. He took jobs at the docks, unloading containers, learning the rhythms of the ships, the schedules of the workers, and the silent communication between men who moved more than just crates. He watched the city's Albanian circles from a distance, noting their habits, their strengths, and their flaws. Among these groups, one man stood out: Luan Berisha. Luan was older, experienced, and ruthless. He had built a network controlling security at nightclubs, moving goods through hidden routes, and maintaining a reputation that kept most people from questioning him. Yet, Erion noticed cracks. Luan trusted too easily, assumed loyalty as a given, and often ignored the small signs of dissent. Erion began forming his own group, carefully selecting men who felt overlooked or undervalued in Luan's circle. He offered them clarity, structure, and rules that were simple but absolute. No mistakes, no disloyalty, no excuses. He rewarded efficiency and punished failure quietly but decisively. Each member understood that Erion was different from others they had known. He was patient, calculating, and always observing. While Luan relied on intimidation and reputation, Erion relied on timing and information. Within months, Erion's influence grew. Small shipments disappeared from minor docks, unexplained delays occurred, and rumors began circulating about a new Albanian presence rising in the city. No violence had been used, yet tension began to build. Workers whispered among themselves, nightclub owners sensed an undercurrent of caution, and the city's Albanian networks felt an invisible pressure they could not explain. Erion had positioned himself in the shadows, where he could strike without revealing his hand, watching as Liverpool slowly adjusted to his presence. The docks, once bustling without concern, became a place of silent observation. Men moved cautiously, checking their surroundings, wary of the unseen eyes that followed them. Nightclubs that had once felt safe under Luan's protection now felt uncertain, security teams questioning movements they previously ignored. Even ordinary citizens, unaware of the power struggle unfolding, noticed subtle changes, an increase in late-night activity, new faces appearing, and small yet mysterious disruptions in the usual flow of the city. Erion understood that power did not always demand immediate confrontation. Sometimes it was built in quiet patience, through observation and careful positioning. He had no intention of moving too quickly. The city would not notice him until it was too late, and when that moment came, he would not need to shout or threaten. Liverpool would recognize a new force simply because everything around it had changed without anyone understanding how. By the end of his first year, Erion Kodra was no longer just a newcomer. He was an invisible presence, quietly shaping the underworld, patiently waiting for the right moment to claim the city without exposing himself too soon. The stage was set, and the unseen war had begun. Luan Berisha had grown complacent over the years. His network was vast, stretching across Liverpool's docks, nightclubs, and underground transport routes. He believed that his reputation and connections would protect him indefinitely, that loyalty among his men was unshakable, and that rivals were either too weak or too cautious to challenge him. Yet the city was changing quietly, and Luan failed to notice the subtle shifts happening beneath his feet. He focused on expansion, aiming to dominate new areas, acquire more shipments, and solidify alliances with influential figures. In doing so, he overlooked the cracks forming within his own circle. Meanwhile, Erion Kodra continued to operate in silence, carefully building a network that was both efficient and invisible. He understood that outright conflict would attract attention and risk the fragile stability he was creating. Instead, he focused on structure, discipline, and control. Every member of his group had a clear role, every movement was calculated, and every operation left minimal traces. His younger sister, Mira Kodra, played a crucial role in this growing empire. While Erion managed the streets, Mira handled finances, creating a web of legitimate businesses, small shops, transport companies, and private logistics firms that served as perfect covers for the flow of money from their operation. It was through these businesses that Erion gained a strategic advantage. Transactions, shipments, and movement of resources could be masked as ordinary commercial activity. No one questioned the trucks that carried goods from one warehouse to another because, on paper, everything appeared legitimate. By the time Luan noticed irregularities, Erion's network was already embedded in the city's infrastructure. He didn't need to show force. The system itself now protected him. Tension began to rise when a critical shipment disappeared from one of Luan's key routes. It was precise, calculated, and undeniable. Luan demanded explanations from his associates, but the missing goods could not be accounted for. Trust began to fracture. People who once followed him without question now hesitated, wary of unseen threats. Rumors spread about a new Albanian figure quietly consolidating power. Some believed Erion was ambitious, but inexperienced. Others whispered that he was already dismantling Luan's influence step by step. Luan responded with impatience. He intensified surveillance on his men, imposed stricter controls, and demanded absolute loyalty. Yet his panic led to mistakes. He targeted minor players, punished loyal associates by accident, and showed the cracks in his leadership. Erion watched, understanding that the key to victory was not confrontation but patience. Every misstep by Luan strengthened his position and weakened the older Albanians' hold on the city. Amid this growing tension, an unexpected variable appeared in Patrick Doyle, an Irish dockworker. Patrick noticed unusual movements, secretive shipments, and unaccounted-for transactions. He began collecting information, not fully understanding the dangers he was navigating. Innocently, he reported findings to both sides, believing he could manipulate the situation to his advantage. Patrick's involvement added an unpredictable element to an already tense environment, nudging Luan and Erion closer to inevitable conflict, while unknowingly providing Erion with insight into Luan's reactions. The city of Liverpool began to feel the invisible pressure. Streets became quieter at night, docks more cautious, and nightclub security more alert. The Albanian networks were no longer operating with confidence. The shadow of Erion Kodra grew larger, unseen but unmistakable, as he prepared for the next phase of a war that would not be fought with guns in the open, but with strategy, patience, and control. Patrick Doyle believed he had found a way to profit from the rising tension between the two Albanian networks in Liverpool. Working as a dock worker, he had access to information few others could see. He noticed shipments arriving late, vehicles taking unusual routes, and certain men moving discreetly at odd hours. Patrick began documenting everything, thinking he could leverage these observations for his own gain. At first he shared minor details with both Erion Kodra and Luan Berisha, believing they would pay him for inside knowledge without realizing he was playing both sides. His confidence grew, and he felt clever, untouchable, and indispensable. However, Patrick underestimated the world he had inserted himself into. Erion had already trained his men to be observant and cautious, and every action was monitored with precision. Luan, although increasingly paranoid, was still ruthless and vigilant when it came to threats. When Erion's sister, Mira Kodra, noticed discrepancies in their logistics and financial records, She began tracing the source. Small, seemingly insignificant errors, unusual inquiries, and repeated sightings of a dockworker asking questions led her to Patrick. She did not act impulsively. Instead, she reported to Erion, who now had a name. Patrick's presence had been noted, but he was unaware of how closely he was being watched. Meanwhile, Luan's desperation escalated. His network was weakening under Erion's silent control, and missing shipments had caused tension with his own allies. Paranoia set in, clouding his judgment. In an attempt to regain authority, Luan ordered his men to make an example of someone. However, his information was faulty, and instead of intercepting Patrick, his men grabbed one of Erion's junior associates. The act revealed Luan's fear and impatience to everyone around him. It demonstrated that he no longer had the meticulous control he once wielded so effortlessly. Erion observed these developments with calculated patience. Every misstep by Luan strengthened his own position. He did not rush to strike or retaliate openly. Instead, he continued to consolidate power quietly, using Patrick's movements as indirect insight into Luan's remaining plans and vulnerabilities. Liverpool's streets were tense, though the ordinary citizens were unaware of the invisible war taking place around them. Dockworkers, shop owners, and nightclub staff began to notice subtle changes: more eyes watching, doors closing slightly earlier, and patterns of movement becoming less predictable. Patrick's interference, intended to make him valuable, had the opposite effect. He became a variable that Erion could use to manipulate Luan's decisions. Luan, desperate to reclaim control, became reckless. He misjudged alliances, misdirected his resources, and created opportunities for Erion to tighten his grip. Every small act of chaos from Patrick and every calculated move by Erion edged the two Albanian circles closer to confrontation without either side fully realizing it. By the end of this phase, Liverpool had transformed. The docks, the streets, and the nightclubs felt charged with unspoken tension. Erion's strategy of patience and observation was paying off, while Luan's paranoia and errors accelerated his own downfall. Patrick Doyle, oblivious to the full consequences of his actions, had inadvertently become a tool in Erion's hands, nudging the city toward a turning point that would determine the true master of Liverpool's underworld. The city itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the inevitable clash that would reshape its dark Albanian bloodline. Erion Kodra had been waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He did not need a public confrontation or loud displays of power. His goal was precision and finality. Luan Berisha's panic and miscalculations had created cracks in his empire, leaving vulnerabilities that Erion could exploit without exposing himself. He studied the Albanian leader's operations carefully, identifying 3 key warehouses that formed the backbone of Luan's network. These locations were not just storage facilities, they were hubs of influence, control, and leverage, each holding goods, money, and connections vital to Luan's power. Erion knew that dismantling these points would destabilize his rival completely, but he needed to do it quietly and legally to avoid attracting unwanted attention from law enforcement. Using anonymous reports and carefully planted intelligence, Erion manipulated circumstances so that authorities would investigate the warehouses. Within 2 days, police raids descended on the locations. Luan's network was caught off guard. Employees were detained, shipments were confiscated, and the financial foundations of his operation were frozen. Panic spread through Luan's men as they realized the empire they had relied upon for years was collapsing in a matter of hours. The meticulous system Luan had built over decades was unraveling, not through open violence, but through strategy and foresight. Luan tried to regain control, but his desperation clouded judgment. He attempted to flee the city, hoping to regroup or seek help from contacts elsewhere. He underestimated how closely Erion had been monitoring every movement, how well he knew the city's routes, and how quietly his network operated. Patrick Doyle, still believing he could profit from the ongoing chaos, revealed Luan's location, unaware that he was sealing his own fate. Erion had the intelligence he needed. He acted with quiet decisiveness. On a deserted industrial road outside Liverpool, Luan was intercepted. Details of the encounter remained hidden, but it was clear that he would never return to reclaim the city he once controlled. The fall of Luan Berisha sent shockwaves through Liverpool's underworld. Associates and rivals alike realized the balance of power had shifted completely. Those who had once feared Luan now recognized that a new force had emerged, one that did not rely on reputation, fear, or loud displays of violence. Erion Kodra had become the invisible authority, operating with efficiency and precision. Patrick Doyle's fate followed soon after. His attempts to manipulate the situation for personal gain had made him vulnerable. Without protection, allies, or understanding of the forces he was meddling with, he disappeared. His absence went largely unnoticed by the public, but within the underworld it served as a cautionary tale. Liverpool's streets grew quieter in some areas and more disciplined in others, reflecting the invisible order now established. With Luan eliminated and Patrick neutralized, Erion and Mira Kodra consolidated their position. Legal businesses continued to flourish, masking the continued flow of resources through their network. Nightclubs, warehouses, and transport lines operated smoothly under their silent control. The city appeared calm to outsiders, but underneath the power structure had been permanently altered. Erion's patience, observation, and strategic precision had allowed him to rise without drawing unnecessary attention, proving that in the shadows of Liverpool, true power was earned through intelligence and control, not intimidation or reputation. Even as the city adjusted to the new balance, whispers began of outside groups watching, of other Albanian networks from London considering expansion into Liverpool. The war may have seemed over, but Erion understood that control was never permanent. The real challenge would be maintaining dominance in a city always ready for change. Erion Kodra had established himself as the unseen ruler of Liverpool's underworld. After Luan Berisha's fall, the city's Albanian networks had fractured, leaving room for Erion to consolidate power without open confrontation. His strategy had been simple yet effective: precision, patience, and careful management of both legal and illegal operations. Mira Kodra continued to expand their businesses, providing the perfect cover for the flow of money and goods. Apartments, transport companies, and nightclubs became legitimate fronts, masking the ongoing operations that allowed Erion to maintain control over the city's shadows. Despite the calm that settled over Liverpool, the underworld remained fragile. Erion knew that dominance in such a city was never permanent. Rival groups always watched, always waited for a sign of weakness. He maintained vigilance, monitoring movement, observing alliances, and tracking shifts in loyalty. Each minor incident, each unexplained disappearance, each sudden change in transport schedules was noted and analyzed. Liverpool's streets carried the quiet tension of a city under watch, where unseen eyes ensured order and control. Rumors began to circulate among smaller criminal groups. They spoke of a man who did not need to show force, a leader who controlled everything from the shadows. Some dismissed the stories as exaggeration. Others feared that even a glance in the wrong direction could bring consequences. Erion's reputation grew quietly, built on efficiency, invisibility, and the undeniable results of his strategy. Even those outside his network began to sense the changes in the city. Dock workers moved cautiously, nightclub staff followed strict protocols, and ordinary citizens noticed the subtle enforcement of order without understanding its source. Yet the rise of Erion Kodra also attracted attention from groups beyond Liverpool. Albanian networks in London began to take note of the silent empire forming in the north. Unlike Luan, they did not fear Erion's subtlety. They measured strength in visibility, boldness, and open demonstrations of power. Some believed that a leader who operated entirely from the shadows could be challenged with calculated aggression. Whispers of potential incursions began to spread quietly through the city's criminal circles. Erion anticipated this. He did not underestimate outsiders, nor did he show panic. He expanded his intelligence network, creating unseen channels for information gathering, observation, and influence. Any potential threat could be monitored, misdirected, or neutralized before it became significant. Liverpool's underworld had shifted from a battlefield of open confrontation to a chessboard of strategy, where every move was calculated, every risk minimized, and every outcome controlled. In this new era, Erion maintained order not through fear alone, but through precision, foresight, and the illusion of invisibility. The city appeared calm to the outside world, but beneath that calm lay a complex, silent system of control, one that ensured loyalty, managed resources, and eliminated threats before they could surface. Liverpool's dark bloodline had not ended with Luan Berisha. It had evolved, reshaped under the careful hand of a new leader who understood that true power was measured not by who shouted the loudest, but by who moved unseen, with complete command over their domain. As Liverpool adapted to this new reality, one truth remained clear. The shadow of Erion Kodra loomed over the city, and while peace seemed to prevail, the cycle of ambition, rivalry, and power was never truly over. The underworld waited, silent and patient, for the next challenge. Erion Kodra's dominance in Liverpool had grown steadily, yet he understood that power in the underworld was never permanent. Even as his network operated smoothly and his legal businesses masked illicit activities, the city was full of observers, rivals, outsiders, and opportunists, each waiting for a chance to exploit the slightest weakness. Erion had learned from Luan Berisha's mistakes. Visibility could attract danger, and impatience could destroy empires. He maintained a strict system of surveillance, careful planning, and controlled communication, ensuring that every move in the city, whether on the docks or in the nightclubs, was accounted for. The calm that had settled over Liverpool was deceptive. Albanian networks from London had begun sending scouts, small groups of men arriving in the city under various pretexts. They were not openly aggressive, but their presence was enough to unsettle the balance that Erion had worked to maintain. He observed them quietly, gathering intelligence on their numbers, methods, and intentions. These new players were bold, different from the cautious networks of the past, and their audacity presented a new challenge. Erion knew that ignoring them could be as dangerous as confronting them too soon. Meanwhile, Mira continued to expand their legal fronts, opening new logistics companies and nightclubs that doubled as hubs for gathering information. The sophistication of their operations had reached a level where even city authorities remained unaware of the full extent of their influence. Every legitimate transaction, every new lease or shipment, provided cover for the movement of resources and men, keeping Erion's operations invisible while strengthening his network. Liverpool's underworld had become a city within a city, operating silently beneath the surface of ordinary life. Tensions began to surface subtly. Some of Luan Berisha's former associates, resentful of his fall, tried to regain relevance by aligning with the incoming London groups. Erion anticipated this, planting misinformation, creating confusion, and ensuring loyalty remained with him. Every attempt to destabilize his network was met not with open violence, but with careful countermeasures that made potential threats disappear quietly or become irrelevant. The streets, docks, and nightclubs carried an unspoken order that was enforced without obvious force, leaving rivals uncertain and cautious. Yet Erion's greatest challenge was psychological. He needed to maintain not only control, but the perception of invincibility. Whispers of his presence, the disappearance of rivals, and the subtle restructuring of alliances had created a reputation that extended beyond Liverpool. Fear of the unseen force made enemies hesitant to act, and even allies became disciplined and obedient out of respect and caution. Erion understood that this invisible power could be as formidable as guns or gangs, shaping the behavior of the city without ever showing himself openly. Despite the looming threat from London, Erion remained patient. He reinforced his intelligence networks, positioned trusted men at strategic locations, and ensured that no move went unnoticed. The city became a complex chessboard, with each piece in place to counter any incursion. Liverpool's dark Albanian bloodline had transformed into something larger and more resilient. An empire not defined by violent displays but by control, strategy, and the silent dominance of those who knew how to operate in the shadows. The calm, however, was temporary. Even as Erion strengthened his grip, the underworld remained unpredictable. Rival networks could strike, alliances could shift, and the cycle of power, ambition, and conflict would inevitably continue. Liverpool had entered a new era, where the true rulers were unseen, and the city itself had become a silent battlefield, waiting for the next move in the ongoing war of shadows.